if you want to pursue your own policies, your own national advantage in an autonomous manner, then you have got to be self-reliant in developing these technologies. Globally, the move towards nuclear energy has become favorable, essentially because of climate change threat. Setting up new institutions is fine, we should do that. But also address these questions, why our institutions decay.
Which is easier, making a nuclear bomb or building an educational institute? Hello everyone, welcome to SciTalk. Nuclear energy is the fuel of the age. The story behind our country emerging as a nuclear weapon state, along with developing several in-house nuclear reactors, is quite an interesting one. Today we have with us Dr. Anil Kakodkar, Chairman, Rajiv Gandhi Science and Technology Commission, former Chairman, Atomic Energy Commission of India, former Director, Bhabha Atomic Research Center, and an eminent scientist who has played a crucial role in the development of our country's nuclear program. Although widely known for the peaceful nuclear explosions that took place at Pokhran, he has and continues to lead several projects of national importance, rural development, and social transformation. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Starting with one of the very initial projects you took up for when you joined BARC was the development of the Dhruva Reactor. So, how is this reactor conceptually unique in its design?
See, we had at BARC reactor which is known, or it was known, now it has been shut down, Cyrus. It was built under Canadian collaboration. Now, one of the important thing about this large research reactor is it supports large number of researchers pursuing different line, neutron scattering, it could be irradiation of materials, it should be production of isotopes, and so there are large number of areas. Now, it was known that that reactor is getting old, and so BRC required another large research reactor which could also support a significant size of the researcher community in the area of, again, similar areas, but some new dimensions to those areas. So it was felt that we should construct a new reactor. One naturally looks at what are all the different models available around the world, and then you tend to pick up one of them and replicate. At that time, we, particularly me, we proposed that, look, we should also try our hand in kind of conceptualizing this reactor system in an independent way to best serve our interests, both in terms of research reactors, but also get some concepts established which can be useful for power reactors. And secondly, the idea was that it should be a reactor which should take us to a higher level of safety. So it was in that context that when I was asked to kind of start working on this, I put a condition that, look, I'm not going to copy anybody's design. You must give me the freedom, and that we can evolve this concept independently. And that, of course, everybody agreed. So this reactor is different in several ways, in the sense it has a calandria, as the reactor vessel is called, and that sits in a pool of water. So surrounding the calandria is all water, which serves as a shielding, and then beyond that, of course, there is concrete, which the larger biological shield. And immediately in contact with the reactor, you want water, because then you can cool it down. And if you remove most of the heat in water, then the concrete becomes simpler. Otherwise, you have to put coils inside the concrete. So Similarly, we said we'll have this calendar year, but then we'll control the reactor by adjusting the level of the reactor. But at the same time, we said that we'll have the heavy water which is circulating, which will do the job of both cooling the fuel as well as it will do the job of a moderator, a combined circuit. And in reactors, if there is something that mass balance you have to maintain, otherwise the level of in the calendar will fluctuate, and if that fluctuates, the reactivity fluctuates, which is not a good thing to happen. So we designed the hydraulic circuit in a different way. So there are other features which are, but the idea was that it's a independently designed reactor, and it's 100 megawatt is a large system by any, even today's standard it's a large. At that time also it was large. So it was big fun and excitement to do this.
So, on the similar lines, the Madras Atomic Power Station, which is functioning for more than 4 decades now. So, what drove you towards restarting that reactor despite all the opposition?
So the reactor which was already built, it was running for some years. But then there was damage to internals. Large internal parts broke apart. And then, of course, when you start, now if some part is missing, you put some other part. And then there are people who would say that, no, but this is not the same thing as it was originally. What is the guarantee that it will work? So then you have to defend all that. There are safety people who carry out. You have to justify that whatever you are doing is safe. So all that had to be gone through. If it runs, it produces a lot of electricity, in which is a lot of value. But if it doesn't run, then it's a big loss. So every day was important. So we went around, figured out what is it that we can get. And we also got some equipment, at least for putting the vision systems inside the reactor core too. But then it was not quite satisfactory. So finally we said, okay, we'll buy components and assemble, call it a camera which can go inside, send pictures outside to study what is happening, tools to carry out repair inside. So it's like you do, for example, laparoscopy or angiography. So you can imagine that just like we do that in medical science, doing similar things inside a reactor, because you could access that only through a small 4-inch opening, and you have to go maybe 6-7 meters inside and then maneuver the end tip to see what is happening. In fact, the tension was so high that when we were starting the reactor, I stood in the control room for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days continuously, because you couldn't afford to have a mistake. Probably it could be, but luckily everything went. That reactor is running even today. So, but it was, otherwise a few thousand crore asset would have been just junked. So it's producing electricity now.
Yeah, so for this electricity production, there is another nuclear power plant, the Jaitapur power plant, that is being proposed. So it is supposed to produce an nuclear power of 9,900 megawatts. So what is the future of this project, and what are the benefits we are going to get from it?
Well, it's like this, in India we have developed a power reactor system. That type is called pressurized heavy water reactor, PHWR. And we are pursuing our plans to build more and more such reactors and add to the power generating capacity. But when we were negotiating the civil nuclear cooperation, The purpose of civil nuclear cooperation was essentially to be able to buy uranium from outside, because we don't have sufficient quantities of uranium in India, or at least at that time it was not there. So we had mounted also a uranium exploration program, and we did discover significant uranium. But at that time, our capacity factor of reactors was coming down for want of uranium. So we wanted civil nuclear cooperation to open the uh, nuclear commerce in respect of our ability to buy uranium. But at the same time, we also said, when you develop cooperation, it cannot be one-way traffic. So we also said that, well, if in addition to our efforts to add nuclear capacity, if you can get that reinforced by other people supplying nuclear reactors, then the capacity building will go up faster. So that way we created business opportunities for them. We created things which were not available. We created opportunity to get that here. So Jaitapur was a kind of, we're talking to Americans, we're talking to French, we're talking to Russians. So Jaitapur, the plan was that we should set up 6 EPR. It's a kind of PWR developed by France and Germany. But Germany, of course, they have kind of walked out of nuclear programs. So it's essentially France. But to set up 6 nuclear power plants of PWR variety, or which they call it EPR. So that will add to almost 10,000, 9,990 megawatts capacity. And so that was a part of this larger civil nuclear cooperation. Unfortunately, the site has been acquired. We kept it ready. They have given some proposal, but the point is, any high technology, and nuclear technology is no exception. So you do it here within the country, and since it involves a lot of customized activity where specialists are involved, and we have no shortage of specialists in India. Whereas if the same amount of work has to be done in a Western economy, the same specialists, their salaries would be many times larger. And this customized activity is a large component of the cost of reactor. So anything you do, anything high-tech you do abroad is more expensive than here. We've seen this in nuclear, we've seen that in space, all high-tech activities. This is a common feature. So, unfortunately, these reactors, in fact, the condition was that we will be happy to set up nuclear power plants with foreign collaboration, provided they are economically competitive. And meaning, if domestic reactors are producing electricity at some rate, then foreign reactors also should be able to produce electricity at the same rate or a better rate. So because the cost is high, so that equation is not working out. And we told them that, look, the way to deal with this is to make maximum kind of value addition in India. So make all of it in India. Some things may not be possible because of the size and weight and all, but that equation is yet to be balanced. And that is, but whenever I hope it will get balanced soon, and you will see the project construction start.
Yes, we hope to see that. So, like you mentioned, a few of the challenges in terms of cost. So, what are if we look at the social aspect, then what are the challenges that are faced while building up such nuclear power plants in the country, especially when we look into the public domain?
Well, one thing is, unfortunately, the humanity came to know about nuclear energy through the bombing that took place at Hiroshima, Nagasaki. And so there is a kind of huge apprehension in the public mind about that nuclear has a huge damage potential, and both in terms of immediate damage it can cause and also long-term radiation effects. Now, what we need to educate public about is the fact that a bomb is quite different than a nuclear reactor. Nuclear reactor can never explode. It may heat up and there are those meltdown sequences and all, but still it will never explode like that. So this large casualties which happened when there is a nuclear bomb attack, that cannot happen. But then, say Chernobyl happened. Chernobyl happened, again the same fear. So there was a huge distress evacuation quickly. Now that also leaves a trauma in public mind that, well, it's an accident took place and everybody ran for their life, and that number of exodus and number of people in that exodus was very large. What we have not come to terms with is that actually so much of evacuation is not necessary. In nuclear, in the radiation protection community, there is a hypothesis with which they work. It is called linear no threshold, which means that if you are exposed to radiation and there is certain amount of consequence or damage, if you are exposed to half the radiation, the damage would be half linearly. If there is 1/10, the damage will be 1/10. But even if it is 1,000th, there will be 1,000 damage. So there is no threshold. It will keep proportionately, linearly going in proportion to the exposure. Now, as far as normal operation of the reactor is concerned, this is fine because nuclear reactor can cope up with very low radiation. We can design the equipment and all that has been, there is a lot of experience worldwide of doing that. So there is no issue there. But when it comes to dealing with an accident and there is a radioactive fallout release, then it travels with wind. Now, first of all, the direct radiation, it comes down by inverse square laws. You go twice the distance, it becomes 1/4. You 10 times the distance, it will become 1/100th, like that. Now, the people affected or people who get exposed, that also increases, just like radiation comes down if you go away from the source. But the number of people get exposed, that increases as you go away because you are talking about larger and larger area. And so you are talking about larger and larger number of people. So when it comes to calculating the total consequence, you tend to integrate. So there is one term, radiation source, radiation exposure, that keeps coming down. But there is another term, the number of people exposed, that term keeps on going up. And so if you go to 100 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers, it becomes a huge integral. And then you say whatever is your risk factor, and you say so many people would get so much of dose, and then you calculate how many cancer incidents. And then you get, so that becomes the basis for how many people should be evacuated. Now, actually, that is wrong. It has been adopted as a conservative approach, but it's actually wrong. There is evidence to say that there is a threshold, and below that threshold, there is no consequences, zero consequences, but which we don't recognize in terms of the radiation protection design. And that kind of leads to this large exodus or large evacuation. And that large evacuation leads to a kind of a trauma in public mind. That if, for example, now we had the pandemic and lockdown was announced, and people who were in city, they couldn't live in cities because there was no earning. So there was an exodus, and we saw distress exodus, and that leaves an image in your mind. The same thing happened in case of nuclear reactors. So I think the point to recognize is nuclear energy is kind of clean energy, I would say, in the sense it doesn't lead to carbon dioxide emission. And today, global warming has become a bigger challenge. It can kill many more people than Chernobyl. We evacuated so many people, but finally, there are 2 times international team of doctors has looked at what is the health consequences, and except some, I think 30, 40 people who died, and many of them were actually firefighters. They were quenching that fire. So with helicopter, they went above the reactor. And so in the firefighting process, they got a lot of injury, both heat injury, but as well as radiation injury. But if you leave that aside, there has been very little consequences. There have been some incidents of thyroid because of radiation dose, but thyroid is a curable cancer, and that number also is not very large. And then unfortunately Fukushima happened. Again, there was a lot of evacuation. In Fukushima, there is not a single casualty because of radiation, and also there is no kind of human consequences as a result of radiation exposure. There is nothing. But we ended up evacuating lakhs and lakhs of people, and that creates that trauma, and then the public sentiment gets evolved. So it's a matter of educating public, making them aware. And the question is, today, if you see particularly Indian context, we're all talking about clean energy or going to the net zero by 2070, zero CO2 emission by 2070. But at the same time, our energy requirements are going up. I want to be a developed country. We want quality of life comparable with developed countries. Now that requires more energy to be consumed. Now we are all pursuing renewable energy, which is a good thing, solar, wind and all. But if you estimate total solar energy that you can produce on Indian soil, total wind energy that you can produce on Indian soil, that is far too short of the energy that India would require to reach our aspirations of a quality of life comparable with a developed country. And the balance can come only from nuclear. There is no other clean energy source. Now, what is the damage that can happen as a result of nuclear reactor, and what is the damage that can happen as a result of, on one side, if we allow global warming to take place because we are afraid of nuclear reactors, how many people will die because of global warming? And that number will be orders of magnitude larger than this. Or the third option is, all right, we don't want nuclear reactors and we don't have any other energy, so we will live as you are. But that means we are deciding that we will remain underdeveloped. We will never reach the same quality of life as advanced countries. Now tell me how many of Indians would like to reconcile to that situation. Everybody wants to go to US, everybody wants the same kind of lifestyle. Now these are contradictions, and so I think people must understand this. And if you actually Google and ask a question, casualties per unit of energy produced, and compare different energy producing technologies, you will find nuclear is minimum casualty. All other energy sources, including solar, including wind, and of course coal and all is much higher. So it's actually safe, but the perception is otherwise, and that is where I think we need to educate public.
So if we shift to nuclear energy, which is a clean fuel, so will it help in solving the climate change issue that globally we are facing these days, or at least reduce it to some?
Most certainly. In fact, globally, the mood towards nuclear energy has become favorable, essentially because of the climate change threat. For example, European Union Parliament, they actually passed a resolution, a kind of resolution, essentially to say that in their taxonomy of what will be eligible for financing clean energy, nuclear is included. This is, it happened last year sometime. There is actually growing interest in setting up new nuclear power plant capacities in both advanced countries, but also the so-called emerging economic countries, countries where economy is growing. And when economy grows, you require, the energy demand increases and you require those sources. So such countries also, as a part of their clean energy mandate, would want more energy. So, see, nuclear energy is required. One is, of course, to fulfill the deficit wherever there is a deficit. But in addition, see, most of the renewable energy sources, they are variable energies, they fluctuate. Now, for local decentralized generation, which is fine, you can put rooftop and generate, and even if it fluctuates, it's in your own power source, so you live with. The grid-based generation, the centralized generation cannot be like that. Grid has to be maintained stable. And grid is always in a dynamic equilibrium. So every point of time, the generation and the supply to the demand centers has to exactly match. Now, normally in the grid, there is always a variation in the demand side because different users want energy at different point of time in different magnitude. So grid people are used to do that and they adjust the supply to match the demand. Now with renewable energy, there is variation also in the supply side, which is not in your hands. You can't say how much solar insolation will be there or what will be the velocity of wind. You can't control that. So now you want to manage this equilibrium with both supply side varying and demand side varying. So the result of that would be it will end up adding more capacity, more that is more generation capacity, and then you would generate only as much as the demand is there. But you must have, supposing suddenly demand grows or supply somewhere drops, you have to switch on other generators. So you must have that reserve capacity available. You must have invested in a lot of storage because, and then of course you have to have controls because the frequency control, under voltage control. So even under both sides varying, that has to be maintained. Now all this means investment. And there are calculations which have been done which say that with these investment, the tariff to consumer, see, one thing is what is the cost to the power plant owner? That is cheap. Renewable energy is cheap, that we all know. But that is not the cost to consumer because you have to invest in all that what I told you. So that will be done at the distribution level or some level, and finally it will have to be paid by consumers. Now that cost, it goes up significantly because of this variability, or they call it variable renewable energy integration, VRE integration. And the assessment is as the proportion of renewable energy in the grid increases, this integration cost keeps on increasing. And when you reach to near 100%, it could mean, depending on the situation, it could mean twice, it could even mean 4 times. Already in India, of course, our penetration is not all that large, but already there are reports which say that we are paying around 2 rupees extra just on this count. So, you want to keep that under check, then you need base load generating capability. Today that is being provided by coal. Now in a net zero, there is no coal cannot be used because it generates lead stocks CO2 emission. So the what is the alternative, which is a base load but doesn't emit carbon dioxide? And nuclear is the only alternative. So it's not just question of supply demand. Even for these emerging economic countries, for them to balance their grid, they would want a minimum baseload capacity in the form of nuclear. So there is this attraction all over. It's being talked about. And this is actually, to me, it's a writing on the wall. Whether somebody likes it or not, over a period of time, everybody will fall in line because energy is so fundamental to survival.
So, all these capabilities that are required, be it the technological capability or the scientific capability. So, according to you, how important it is for a country to be self reliant in terms of its science and technology?
Well, this is very important. Say, in nuclear, we suffered a lot of embargo, but that is because it has the strategic connotation. But any high technology will always have strategic connotation. It may not be in military sense, but even in business sense. You create monopoly business. There are many defense technologies where countries won't sell to any other country. If because some of these high-end technologies, even computers, some real high-end computers, people won't sell. So high technology where you have a strategic advantage, either in the military sense or in commercial economic sense, there will be always embargoes. And then of course people will weigh, now you are my friend, so okay. Just like you play games, no? So okay, I will give you this, but you do this for me, you do that for me. Now, if you are weak in technology terms, you become vulnerable to this. The countries who are strong, they can kind of force you to fall in their line. If you want to pursue your own policies, your own national advantage in an autonomous manner, I will decide what I want to do. I will not allow other people to dictate to me. Then you have got to be self-reliant in developing these technologies. This concept that with money I can buy anything is valid only up to a point. Beyond that, it is not valid. And that's where self-reliance becomes very important. Now, how did we get civil nuclear cooperation? Because they were convinced. You are coming to that. So, because they were convinced, they put embargo on us. Why? Because they thought India will go towards nuclear weapons capability. When they realized that they couldn't achieve that, India has anyway got nuclear weapons capability. What they succeeded is delaying our power program, electricity generation program. Now, if you think at it in more fundamental terms, preventing India from meeting its energy requirements, what will happen? Either India will choose some alternate energy use, and that's what is happening. We are one of the largest importers of hydrocarbon. Now, from our perspective, of course, it's a big drain on our foreign exchange and it affects our economy. So we want to come out of it. But you look at it from their perspective. If tomorrow the hydrocarbon supply becomes critical, for example, it happened in the Ukraine war or some other disturbance, if it becomes critical, and if there are 10 other consumers or buyers, then for some countries may feel that that would mean that the cost of this energy supply is becoming higher and higher because there are so many other consumers. Now, if on the other hand, those consumers can also have diversity in their energy access, so the dependence on their dependence on hydrocarbons will come down, which in turn they will have that much cheaper supply of hydrocarbon. So they realize that that embargo doesn't work. So then they said, okay, if embargo doesn't work, then why don't we cooperate? And one of the kind of criteria for cooperation, which is actually embedded in the joint statement, is the recognition that India is a responsible country. That is, we are a credible country. We do what we say and we don't do what we don't say. So India is a responsible country with advanced nuclear technology. So that is the basis of cooperation, which means self-reliance.
Yes.
So self-reliance is extremely. If we didn't have self-reliance, all these things would not have happened. So any day, any high technology, you must develop and be self-reliant.
So in all these projects of national importance, there is always a tremendous amount of pressure that was associated with them, be in terms of our nationality or the international pressures. So how did you as a team leader deal with all these pressures and still continue to give still continue to work efficiently and give your 100%? And what was your motivation behind?
One thing is, see, your kind of development must be robust. You cannot get into this on the basis of technologies which are not mature, because then, in fact, something works or does not work and unreliable, then you lose your supporters. They themselves start doubting, then they don't back you. So the first prerequisite is your development must be robust. And so at least your people should be on your side. If it is not robust, the other side will extract their price about it, because it's a relative comparison. So on the other hand, if they know that, if you don't cooperate, these people will anyway go ahead because they are so confident about their own development, then you are in a better negotiating position. So the key is whatever, there is research translation towards technology. So that you must reach a credible state whether you are able to do this in a very confident way. This is number one. Number two is this is all a teamwork, because we are talking about this development where large projects are involved. Obviously, a large number of people are involved, and high-tech activities, there are always challenges. So there must be a strong team to saying that, well, it's not that it is my problem, it is your problem, it is all our problem, and just come what may, we will solve that problem. So you must develop that team spirit. That team building is very important. And finally, in spite of that, of course, there are many distractions. So you have to engage with them, in the sense there are people who will make criticism, who will make arguments for, against, and all. So one way is to ignore them, but if you ignore them for too long, the counter force builds up. So you have to remain engaged with them. And so, for example, this nuclear, there is always this issue about radiation and public perception and all. So, and there will be some people who will have issues. But if that swells, the people on the other side will take advantage of it. So you must deal with this and make sure that uh, a larger number of people are on your side. So this has to be, it depends on once you are confident about yourself and you have commitment of yourself, then everything falls in.
So, coming to the institution building aspect, so what was your vision behind setting up institutes like the Homi Bhabha National Institute or the National Institute of Science Education and Research?
Well, the issue is towards the end of my career, of course, we are very confident that and very also justifiably proud that we have developed all these technologies. But there was always this recognition that these are technologies which have been also developed by other countries at some time. So, although we had done this on the basis of self-reliance, we had done this in spite of embargo and all that, but it is not something which is first time ever in the world. It is something which others had done. So when I started looking at what is our capability, our means Indian capability, I found that we always look for doing something which others have done so that we are confident that we put in that work, we will get result. Now, which is not a very conducive thing, and I think the advanced technology countries are not like that. If some countries developed the technology first time, that means they have not looked at some model that existed elsewhere and copied. They, on the basis of their research, they push the frontiers of knowledge. They also push the frontiers of technology and translated that new knowledge into new technology. Now, I find that capability in our country is yet to develop. It's not fully developed. Now, so I think, for example, research institutions like say IISER, you do a lot of work which is basic. Now, and basic work we do quite well in India, but it's not connected to technology. Now, the important thing is you need to develop technology. You want to be a frontline country in technology term, but for that there has to be enough foundational research from where these technologies can emerge, which is in the basic domain. And that ecosystem where this gets connected has to evolve. Now, I found in atomic energy we have institutions like BARC, which are major technology powerhouses. But HBNI does more foundational work in the backdrop of this technological need. Then I felt somewhere that I will be able to better convert knowledge into technology. And HBNI was actually visualized in that context. And I'm not saying that it has realized that goal. It takes time in the sense, see, I can't tell somebody that no, within 10 years, I must have this technology. It doesn't work like that. But at the same time, because foundational work, you cannot constrain, you have to leave an open-ended thing. There is also the Center of Excellence for Basic Science in Mumbai University. Now the question is, you must ask this question, why institutions decay? See, you look at an institution like Cambridge, Oxford, or even other, they are several centuries they are functioning, but they don't decay. In India, we had example of Nalanda. If you see, total duration is many centuries. It didn't decay. But then why is it that our 100-year-old, 150-year-old universities have decayed? So the question was that setting up new institutions is fine, we should do that. But also address these questions, why our institutions decay. And so we said, okay, we'll do the repeat of whatever is happening at IISER or NICER. We'll repeat in existing university with existing framework. And that is what CEBS is. And there are lots of problems, but I think not bad, it's doing good. And it's happening at 1/10 the cost. Because everything is there, all infrastructure is there. So you can do it much cheaper. The problem is people. People should develop mindset to cooperate with each other, work with each other. So I call it cultural revolution. So CEBS came into existence so it's a different challenge which led to each one of. So as I went along, I saw a different challenge. So you create these interventions to address those challenges. That's how it is.
From the national level projects to you have tried to reach to the grassroots level also, be it the seed breeder reactor for farmers or the rural development or your concept of silage ecosystem. So what was your vision behind starting these projects and what was your aim behind?
Silage was another thing. The question is, see, as it is, there is disparity between cities and villages. Now, anybody, a young person from a village, why earning or livelihood? Even for education, the need is that you can study only up to some point in a village. Then you have to come to city. So this disparity that we see today and that need for migration from villages to cities is, according to me, is a manifestation of industrial era. And there are many economists who even today say that no, you should allow more exodus from villages so that agriculture will become more efficient. In the sense, agricultural output is only, 16-17% of GDP. So you should have only 16-17% of our population in villages. Everybody else should come to city. Now, if you do that, whether city infrastructure will be able to keep pace with it, will cope with it, or you will create slum areas. And more importantly, I say that this mindset that there are larger opportunities in cities, how long this will continue? Now the question is, if in an IT industry you can work from home, so if my home is in a village, why can't I work from village? I can do that. So what tells you that opportunity in village is less compared to opportunity in city? According to me, as far as service sector, which is around 50% or more of India's economy, if you have a properly educated, trained individual, one can work from city or a village in equal ease. Same thing is true for manufacturing. Manufacturing is, you can easily decentralize it now. Now, you can do agriculture, you can do manufacturing, you can do service sector activity in a village. Now, you can't do all the three with same ease in a city. You can do agriculture. There are vertical agriculture, hydroponics and all. But that cannot be as competitive as the conventional agriculture. So, my proposition is today, in principle, you can have larger opportunities in villages than cities. Only thing is, village infrastructure does not allow that. The ecosystem in villages is not up to the mark. So, I think the answer is develop that. And then why should somebody want to go to city? city life and village life, I would say village life is so much more enriched if you have that ecosystem. So why do we need to continue this mindset of industrial era when we are in knowledge era, and that's the cause of our disparities? Why can't we correct? So that's why silage. So it's a question of, if you have a problem, you must find a solution. That's the path of science, no? So whether it's in the context of education or in the context of social transformation or development, I think it's equally valid there. So that's how it comes about.
So if we look into all these insights, like creating awareness among public about the clean energy fuel or the nuclear fuel, and then asking these questions, why do institutes decay, or developing villages technologically. So could these be the measures to work upon in the light of India Vision 2047?
Well, I would say yes. I would see. To me, there are three fundamental things. If you look at what are the basic human needs, you have that Maslow pyramid. So it's identity, prosperity, security. Now translate that in terms of our development ambition. I would want to make sure that average Indian has at least same quality of life as the advanced countries, best countries in the world. Because that's why should I be inferior? So that's, again, you want economic growth. Without technology, you cannot do that. The next issue is security. And security, both you can think of external security, internal security, whatever. Now, one is you must create conditions where human thinking always remains benevolent and not malevolent, which is an ideal thing which will never happen. You can move towards that ideal. So, if you want to deal with those malevolent forces, you need to address the security challenges they create. Again, issue of technology. Okay. Most importantly is this question of human wellness. Just because you have all the money or you are all powerful doesn't mean you are well off. Maybe you still have sleepless nights. Now, human wellness has something to do with nurturing values. Nurturing, I always say, we call ourselves human, but after all, we belong to animal kingdom. And there is animal spirit, which is not the same thing as human values. So, animal spirit is there in each one of us. Now, human wellness is doing something far better than just being an animal. So that's a part of upbringing, that's a part of mentoring, and this doesn't come by preaching, this comes by practice. So the short point is that you must look at holistic development, and science and technology to me plays a role in everything. And it is that holistic approach which would take humanity to be better and to be where we want it to be.
Yeah, so let's move to the final segment of our discussion today, the rapid fire round. So I'll start with the first question. Which has long-term benefits, thorium or uranium?
Well, in Indian context, thorium.
Which role is more dear to you, Director BARC or Chairman Atomic Energy Commission?
Director BRC.
One aspect which we need to build very strongly in order to be self-reliant.
Well, I think I would go back to education. One is critical thinking, but not thinking by itself is not enough. Thinking and then ability to carry forward that thinking.
Which is easier, making a nuclear bomb or building an educational institute?
I think it depends on if you want to do things of right quality and not run of the mill thing, then anything you want to do with excellence is more challenging, whether it is education institution or a bomb. Only thing is, a bomb, if you don't do well, it doesn't work. Education institution, you don't know whether it is working or not. But I would say most of our education institutions are not working. But they are working. There are students, they're passing their degrees, they're getting their certificates. Now, in that sense, it's easy. But in terms of an institution which is in the top class in the world, you see, the point is, answer this question. Why is it that in India you don't have any university which is in top 100 ranks? We're 1/6 of humanity, right? So why is it that not single university in India is in top 100? And in some ranking systems, we are not even in top 400. Well, nothing is easy if it has to work at the highest level of excellence. You have to work very hard for it. That's true for the bomb, that's true for an education institution.
What is atomic energy for you, for the country?
Well, it's like, see, energy, long time back, the energy was, in the sense, I carry stones from one place to another. There is a change in potential energy or something rolling down from a hill. That also is a way of producing energy or hydro energy in that. Then we started burning coal or oil and produce energy. Now you can assign a calorific value, how much energy you get per unit mass. And you would find that mechanical energy, you produce least energy. Heat or chemical energy, per unit mass, you put more energy out of it. Nuclear, you put much more energy per unit mass. The calorific value is much, much higher. Now, earth resources are always depleting. The energy requirements are going up. Now, you want to balance our requirement and also cope up with depleting earth resources, you have to go to sources with higher and higher calorific value. So, nuclear energy is, according to me, unavoidable. If not today, tomorrow.
The secret behind your calm and composed nature?
Well, I think it's a question of understanding this world. And I don't think anybody can reach a perfect understanding. It's a complex world. But as long as you feel that you understand it enough, you can remain at peace with yourself because it doesn't threaten you. It doesn't. So if you are confident about yourself, you will remain calm. If you are not, then you will become uneasy. So.
Okay. Thank you
Done?
so much, sir. It was indeed a pleasure to have you with us. And
Thank
thank
you
you so much for giving time for this.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you.